Alrighty, welcome everybody to this episode of Communications and Cigars, the last one for 2021. I'm your host, John Crook, and I welcome you to the show. Listener mail, viewer mail, we got a couple titles for tonight. We've been working back and forth on a couple. Part two of it. To play off part one, this is questions that came in from people who are saying, hey, I want to go ahead and I have a follow-up question, and can you go ahead and answer it to me? Or, hey, it was a post question after an episode. Really, really good questions on there. And so what do? I didn't want them to go to waste. These are questions that, really did not... They needed more than an email answer. That's the best way to put it, in my opinion. And then the question was good that it might cause other people to think about it. And that's where we came in and said, you know what, let's take these questions, part two, and kind of answer them also too. Now, a couple things before the show starts. Last week's episode is kind of getting better with it. We've had a little bit of a bug going around the house here. So if I do sneeze, I do cough, I do apologize. I know it's not good for video and everything like that, and I do apologize. But, hey, we're getting over it. It's not COVID. It's not strep. It's not influenza. It's nothing like that whatsoever. So I am extremely happy about it. So every once in a while, if you see me, I feel like I'm ready to sneeze now. Excuse me. And there it is. Yep. Excuse me. If I do that a little bit tonight, I apologize, hands down. I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything like that, and sometimes coughing or sneezing really irritates people, and once again, I apologize about that whatsoever. So that's what's kind of going on tonight here, but we want to get into those questions, and like I said, really good questions that came in, and I think some really good more explanation to expand on what the topic of that episode was on there. Now, before we get started, obviously, this is Communications Cigars. We're going to talk about communications, obviously, but let's talk about the cigar aspect of things. Now, a lot of people have said, John, we don't see you doing the cigars anymore on your show, or why not? Well, I am in Studio B, the basement, okay? Because Studio A or outside, it gets a little bit too cold here in northwest Wisconsin, so western Wisconsin area. But we've been having some very weird weather lately. And the days have been a little bit nicer, so I was able to get out and enjoy a cigar. So I wanted to take time to take a picture of me having a cigar. Now, there's a reason why. So let's go to that picture. Wow, look at that. Look at that. Whew. Yeah, you could tell that I had time off over the Christmas holiday there. But I did want to show that this was today outside in Studio O, I guess we can call it for outside. I was enjoying a cigar called a Macaw. So yes, it's an actual Macaw cigar. That's the name of it. Now, reason I wanted to bring up this picture is because this is a tribute to say thank you to a viewer of the program. Now, this viewer of the program, they know that obviously I like cigars. They know that I kind of am somewhat of a cigar aficionado. And I say that due to the fact of I kind of know what I like. I know how to tell differences between brands and wrappers and tobacco leaf and, humidor stuff and all that kind of stuff like that on there and blah, 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 blah. But I did want to say thank you because this was sent to me and I had a chance to enjoy it today. Really, really nice cigar. It's not flavored. It's not sweetened or anything like that whatsoever. Because, for example, I like the Macanudos, which there's a coffee flavor and there is the bourbon flavor ones that I really like on there. But then also, too, is I like the Deadwood Tobacco Company that has Sweet Jane and Fat Bottom Betty's and stuff like that on there. So I do like there. And some people said, and people ask, well, do you like non-flavored cigar? And yes, I do. I like the Romeo and Juliets. I do like some of the Cayos. I do like some of the Noobs on there. I have a couple different ones, but like I said, this was specifically sent in to me saying, John, I think you might like it. It's not sweetened, because people have asked, well, why do I like a little bit of flavor to the cigar? Well, the reason I like a flavor to cigar is because after you start smoking a cigar for a while, depending on the big ring size of the cigar and everything like that, you may tend to get a little bit of an aftertaste in there. You may get something that doesn't really please the palate. I've had cigars where I've maybe got a quarter to a third way through, and I'm just like, this is the most horrible, rancid thing I've ever tasted, and I gotten rid of it right away. This is not the case with this Macaw. It's got a medium brown wrapper is the way I will put it on there. But more importantly, is you can kind of see from the picture, there's a little bit of that smoke kind of blowing sideways because the wind was kind of coming sideways at me today. Not very heavy or fast when I was out there, right? You know, evening time here, horrible, right? But it was nice. I really don't know how to describe it. It's pleasing to the palate. It's not a strong odor for people around. It burned evenly, even in these horrible weather conditions, you know, the high wind conditions. Usually that's what I get really afraid of, is I'll toast the bottom of the cigar and then the tip of it, I should say, and then light the cigar evenly on there to get a nice, clean, even burn. And guess what? This stayed evenly burning, even in the high winds here and stuff. Very pleasing to the palate. Once again, one of those that it's just all around just a great, awesome cigar. But I really wanted to say thank you. The person that sent it to me did say in the little note they included, John, please don't say who sent it. They obviously, I would assume that they didn't want people going ahead and turning it into saying, you know, like, hey, well, you sent John a cigar. Can you send me a cigar? So I want to respect that request from that person. So by all means, I won't say it, but I do want to say, if you are watching, which I'm sure that you are, because that's how you determine to send it to me, thank you very much for it. It was a very, very nice gift, and I actually got it 30 days ago. Yeah, maybe 30 days ago. It was before Thanksgiving, let's put it that way. And they sent it to me. Like I said, really, really appreciative of it. Thank you so much. I did, like I said, really enjoy it. I wish the weather was a little bit better. I could spend time outside, you know, and all that stuff a little bit more. But I specifically went out there, did smoke it outside, and then proceeded from there. So once again, thank you. Also, so if you have questions about the show, if you have a topic for the show, if you have comments for the show, if you want to chat more about cigars, I've had a few people that have sent me questions and stuff like that saying, hey, John, da-da-da-da-da-da, can you help me with this? Go ahead and drop me an email. It's right here, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Once again, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. And yes, my show here now is sponsored by JJK Communications. It's nice that we actually have made some improvements and stuff like that through sponsorship, through the business on there. So it is nice that we have there. They do provide an email for us. We do thank you for their support there. So once again, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Alrighty, let's start talking and let's dive into these questions. So the first question is actually going to come from a show that we did a couple weeks back that talked about repeated and direct type of communications. So, like, you know, the difference between the two. Because a lot of people think they pick up a radio. And, like, if you watch TV, Hollywood movies and stuff like that, what is one thing they always do? They always can communicate crystal clear unless the communication is vital to the point that it has to do something with the storyline. Then the communications doesn't work. But with that being said, it's good to know the difference between direct and repeated communications. Now, with this question is when you discuss direct versus repeated, which one is really better? So it's like, okay, which one is really better? That makes a very good point or question that needs to be answered. Now, let me do this. Let me go through and kind of, first of all, let's unclutter the radio services that have direct versus repeated communication. So we have direct and repeated communications in amateur radio. We don't in CB. We do not in MERS. We do and we don't in FRS, because FRS can be tied into GMRS. So let's say no FRS, but GMRS obviously is a yes. Marine, they have split channels, but not a lot of repeaters there. They have like maybe some ships have onboard repeaters, but for the most part, nope, it's not there. But when you get into business LMR or you get into public safety, you have repeated type of communications. So what is best? Well, what's going on with you? I guess, it's like, I hate to answer a question with the question because sometimes that makes people think like the other person doesn't know the answer or that they don't give two squats about it or something. And that's actually not the case here. But let me give you a good example. Let's say you live in a town, and let's say you live in this town, and let's just say it's a rural town, small town, Wisconsin. Let's say it's about 3,000 people, and you have a water tank in the center of the village, the town that you live in, and it's an 80-foot tall, 100-foot, let's say 100-foot, argument's sake, 100-foot tall water tower. You got an antenna, and there's a repeater that you can access on top of there. Whether it be an amateur, whether it be GMRs, whether it be public safety or business LMR, it doesn't matter. But let's say there's a repeater you can go ahead and access. So if you live in that village and you have a handheld radio and you need to communicate with other people that are not in the general vicinity of you. So if you're in your house with a handheld and you try to talk it, you might get, depending band and frequency and digital and blah, 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 blah. You might be able to get a quarter to half a mile. You might. And I say you might because I don't know if you will or won't, because there's a lot of factors that go into it that can't be controlled. Okay? That really can't. Right? So if you have a handheld and you're trying to talk to a person across town, and let's say town is, 5-6 miles from point A to point B, from north end to south end, guess what? You may not be able to use direct. You may need to use that repeater. Or maybe you're in the village or town or city or whatever, and then you're talking to someone who may be 15 miles away on a mobile radio that can hit the repeater because the water tower is 100 feet high, okay? Then you're going to need to use the repeater. But let's say that you are on scene or you're on site, or maybe you are working the local factory and you need to communicate across the factory. Guess what? You may use direct communication. Now, the best part about radio services that have the ability for you to license or use a repeater have the ability to do what they call a talk around channel. So that's actually where the word TAC came from, talk around channel. That's what TAC means, okay? So maybe you might have a TAC, or maybe you might have a direct, or maybe you might have a car-to-car. There's a bunch of different names, the nomenclature we can go over for days on it, but it's going to be a direct or a simplex if we really want to break down to the terms of things. So in that case, if you just need to talk to someone locally, then guess what? You probably will want to use a direct channel. If you need to go distance, you might want to use a repeater channel. I've actually had times in public safety and business and everything where we're so broken into the mindset of repeater is going to work. It's going to cover miles. It's a repeater, right? That's what works. But then you start using a repeater and you find out that you are actually having a hard time communicating with the person because you are either too far away from the repeater, or B, you just can't receive the repeater because of some interference or reason or something like that on there. Now, the amateur world has had a little function on their radios for the longest time, and that function is actually called the reverse function. All right, yeah, I just have one of the radios here. I have it here. I have an FT70, but see the button right there? It says kind of right by my finger, HM/RV. The HM stands for home, but the RV stands for reverse. What you could do is you can hit that button, and what it does then is, it's, normally you receive on the output of the repeater and you transmit on the input of the repeater. Well, what happens is that when you hit the reverse, it switches frequencies real quick. So what you're doing actually is you're transmitting on the output of the repeater and you're listening on the input of the repeater. So it kind of makes your radio act how a repeater would act for the frequencies that it's using for transmit and receive. But I've done that a few times where I'm going by, I know someone might be close by, and I want to see if I could reach them on simplex or whatever, and I'll just go ahead and hit the home button on the repeater, and then it flips the frequencies. Now all of a sudden I can hear them almost better when it's in reverse mode. So next time I go ahead and hit reverse, I go back to the normal operation. Then all of a sudden the people, I'll say, hey, I can hear you on the input of the repeater. You want to go over to simplex then and talk, and you can go from there. Another reason why you would choose direct over repeated is that if your repeater goes down, you need a direct channel. So once again, numerous different reasons of usage. When you start talking about also repeater systems, I guess I should say that I'm talking about conventional standalone, meaning one repeater in and out conventional, that kind of thing like that. Some repeater systems are simulcast, multicast, multi-receiver, networked with other repeaters. Like you could have, 4 or 5 different repeaters on different frequencies that are all linked together. Numerous different communication setups and everything like that on there. So really, it's going to take some time for you to see what is the best. Once again, most business licenses will allow you to, and I say business and public safety because you don't necessarily need a separate frequency. If you're going to be doing a lot of business or a lot of other people are going to use a repeater and you may need a simplex, then you might want to license a separate channel on there. But for the most part, it's really easy to get 2 frequencies, a repeated and a direct or simplex frequency. So once again, the answer to your question is what's going to be the best for you. So hate to leave it that way, but that's what it is. Alrighty, next question. Question number 2 was an episode that we did and got some interesting comments on there. And I say in that regards because some people said, hey, great show, really explained the difference between the radio services, why you need licenses, part 90 versus 95 versus part 97, all those things like that on there. Created some debates. Wasn't trying to do that, but did create some debates. But the question came, and they said, does every radio need to be certified under Title 47 parts? Meaning Part 90, Part 95, Part 97 are part of the ECFR U.S. Title 47. And what does that mean? And all that mumbly gunk term for people aren't there. It basically says that there's different parts of the Title 47 code that deal with specific radio services. So, for example, public safety and business, they usually fall under Part 90. Then there's Part 95. Then there's Part 97. And then, all the different parts deal with like GMRS, FRS, MERS. Part 80 is Marine, CB radios, amateur radios, all those kind of things like that on there. But then what happened is that someone emailed me this question. And I don't want this question to be taken out of context because then they asked a couple more questions. And then they kind of went back to this question. So the question really boils down to is certification of the radios. Now, this is a big thing because Baofeng is kind of getting their proverbial tit in a ringer, okay? Because they've been selling some radios that were not FCC type accepted. So this is what they consider type acceptance. And what type acceptance basically means is that your radio that is there, whether, once again, Marine, amateur, and GMRS, FRS, all that stuff, blah, 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 okay, falls in a category, and those different parts state how they are supposed to operate. Now, the confusing part about it is if you are, let's deal with amateur radio, first of all, because this is kind of where I think this question kind of spurred out of. Do amateur radios need to be type accepted? And the answer is yes, but yes, when it comes from a manufactured source. Now, amateur radio operators, we could build our own radios. Okay, we literally could go when Radio Shack was there and people build radios. And I know people that have built QRP kits and CW kits and all these kind of things like that and everything on there with just, let's get parts from Radio Shack. But when it comes from a manufacturer, they have to be certified. So if you build it at home for amateur usage only, stress amateur usage only, then you do not have to, for amateur usage, you do not have to certify your own radio. But if you're buying a commercially made radio, meaning you go to a store, you go online or something, you say, hey, I want to buy that radio, here's my money, then yes, those radios need to be certified. Now, where it gets into the gray area, and this is kind of where those questions kind of did that, is can one radio certification cover other radio certifications? And this is a very tricky area because Part 90 radios will cover the frequency band spectrum that amateur radios use. Okay, so for example, Part 90 radios in VHF 136 to 174 usually. Part amateur radio certified radios from like a manufacturer cover 144 to technically 147.995. They just usually say 148 megahertz. So an amateur radio can only legally transmit in that bandwidth there, 144 to 148. LMR radios can legally transmit 136 to 174. Now, why do I bring it up? Well, because this gets into that gray area. Can I use a Part 90 radio on amateur radio stuff, which is Part 97? And the answer is technically yes. But then it gets into other hobbies and stuff like that and services, which can I take a amateur radio? Can a Part 97 radio be modified to be used on Part 95? Can a Part 95 be used on Part 90 and 97? And it comes across the whole board. And this gets really into sticky wicket. That's why I overall answer is yes, radios need to be certified. They do. Now, some people have said, when I've said this too, and I've tried to explain it to people, they said, well, if amateur radios can be made at home, can I make my own, let's say, GMRS radio? And that answer is no, you cannot. Those need to be certified because there are certain parts of that certification of the part of the FCC, or excuse me, ECFR, Title 47, Part 95, kind of stuff like that. They have specific requirements on there. So overall, yes, every radio needs to be certified, especially if it's coming in and out. Now, kind of a follow-up question to this that I have from the same person is where can I find the certification for it? Well, on each radio that is made, okay, that is manufactured and sold, that is type accepted in the United States. Now, I say United States, and this kind of falls into Canada too, because I'm not sure about other countries. I'm not sure about like the UK, Russia, Japan, Asia, Austria, South America, those kind of things like that on there. But all radios will have an FCC ID on the radio. They have to have that attached to the radio. And like for an example here, as I grab my public safety radio here, and I take off my label of what's wrong with it that I've been working on, by the way, for like 2 years. On there, it actually has an FCC approved number on there. So they'll have a model number and stuff, but like for this one here, it's like it's an EF Johnson one, but it's approved 933B-2425111. That's also the model number on there, happens to be on there. But that is the FCC certification on that one. Put that back there. But they have to fix it to the label where it gives the model number as well as the serial number. That is FCC law. Now, one of the things that's interesting is that some of my friends from Coffee and Ham Radios, they did a review. I believe it was Ham Radio Dude. He did a radio review on a radio, and he checked into the FCC number on it, and they had printed, quote unquote, an FCC type acceptance number on there, but then the number didn't exist in the FCC database. So you can actually go and actually search the FCC database for it. So you can just do a Google search of FCC type acceptance on there. And then usually what it is you have to enter the first 3 or 4 letters, and then the rest of it will break the radio down even more. I think the first 3 or 4 letters deal with the company's name or tied to the company somehow. And the last part is there on there. And you'll see with that FCC type acceptance, it will give you what is approved, what the performance is of the radio, that radio actually must maintain on there. So you do a little research. It's kind of fun to do it. But like I said, I had a lot of people that come, like, do I buy this Baofeng or Woshen or Lishen or Anytone or Baofeng, whatever, blah, 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 all the radios on there. Should I buy it? Well, I mean, to be in the letter of the law, you should have a radio that's type acceptance, because if it is actually truly type accepted, it's going to have performance standards on there. So, good question. Does the radios need to be certified under Title 47? So, our next one comes to from us dealing with what radio service is right for you. When we did that episode, it kind of came into play as saying what might be right for you. So, we talked about amateur, we talked about marine, we talked about marine, CB, FRS. We talked about all the different radio services and kind of the pros and cons out of them. And there are pros and cons to all the different radio services. But the one question I had here is how many people run multiple radio services for operation? And the simple answer is a lot of people. I myself have amateur radios and business LMR radios and radios capable marine operation, radios for FRS, GMRS, radios for MERS, radios. I technically do have a CB radio, actually. Haven't used it in a while. But we do have those types of radios on there. Some people are just going to be using radios as a hobby. They may only be interested in amateur radio. Other people may just only be interested in marine. I have a friend of mine who he does some stuff with a private railroad company, and guess what? He has amateur and he has railroad radio. So really, it kind of, once again, all depends. Kind of come back on that show, what you're looking for, what you're needing to use for. You know, this show being 2 days post Christmas, love to turn on the scanner, love to turn on the FRS channels and hear everybody pushing all the kids in the neighborhood going, pushing the little call tones on the radio and everything like that. Because guess what? Everybody got a bunch of FRS radios for Christmas and they're playing with them. And they'll play with them until the batteries probably go dead and end up in a closet or end up in a dresser. Excuse me. Dresser somewhere, stuff like that, probably never be able to touch again until, what's these things on there for and everything like that on there. But yes, most people do. I do personally because of the disciplines or the purposes of the radios that I have. If I need to talk business, I need to do something like that, I'll use my business frequencies. If I'm playing a paramedic shift, I'm using public safety channels. If I'm going to go out hunting or caravanning with some people, I'll ask, hey, do you have GMRS, FRS, or MERS radios? And usually they have one of those 3 types of radios. So once again, multiple people do run it for multiple purposes. I really find the average person who's involved with radios probably run at least 2 or 3. And I'll say amateur and GMRS, FRS are the 2 probably the biggest ones I see. But there are people that will tack on CB, will tack on marine, will tack on MERS, those kind of things like that on there. So yes, the answer is overall, yes, a lot of people do. And is there anything wrong with that? No, it's not. It's really adapting your radio communications or preference to what the situation needs to be. All right, next question. So we talked about, this comes from an episode where we talked about coming up, like using a communication safety plan, kind of went in a little bit to our ICS, but we talked about hunting. It was right before hunting week up here, about writing down what frequencies you were going to use when you go hunting. And then even so, going one step further and coming up, like if there's a time you're lost or missing, or there's some trouble or something like that, when you would specifically be on a radio. So let's say you have your GMRS radio with you and you go missing. Well, guess what? You could be on your GMRS radio and then at certain time intervals, always be on that channel for you. So with that being said, the question came up is, when designing a radio safety plan, to the people need to be able to operate on it? In other words, do they need to be licensed? So that's a very, very good question. Because when we talk about a safety plan, so let's say, for an example, I'm going out hunting, and this is what I'm interpreting question as. If I'm wrong, to whoever sent this question in to me, excuse me, in the new year, I want you to hit me up, give me an email and jingle and say if this question is wrong, but I think I kind of got it. So if I'm going to go out hunting, or I'm going to go walking out on my trails, or I'm going to go do something like that, or whatever, and I am an amateur radio operator, and I say I'm going to be on this simplex frequency or this repeated frequency, and if you don't hear me at, if there's a problem or something like that, and you can't find me, listen for me at 5 minutes, at the 5 minute interval. So 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 25 minutes, 35 minutes, 40, that kind of thing, that in there. So the question then I'm guessing is like, well, if I'm an amateur radio operator and I'm missing and I need help, does the other person trying to call me or trying to get a hold of me have to be an amateur radio operator also? And really the answer is yes, because if I'm just take a little bit longer on my walk or something that's not an emergency, can that person have the right to hop up in there and call me because they can't get a hold of me? Well, no, they can't. It's not declared an emergency at that point. But yes, that person should be licensed for that radio service or that radio operation on there for that purpose. But if you really take a look at it, you need an amateur radio license for the most part, amateur, right? The amateur radio license for amateur, right? Do you need one for CB? No, you don't. Do you need one for MERS? No, you don't. Do you need one for FRS? No, but do you need one for GMRS? Yes, but can FRS radios now legally operate on the output of GMRS repeaters or on GMRS channels? Yes. So you're kind of covered under the FRS license there. Marine, do you need a license? No, you do not. But business, do you have to have a license? You do not have to have a license. There has to be a person who's a license holder, but you could be given temporary authorization to operate on that frequency. The overall thing is you want to make sure that the type of communication you're going to be using as your safety plan, your ICS plan, dictates or corresponds to someone who will be able to communicate with you on that plan. Once again, if you're going to give this great plan that I'm going to be on this repeater and this simplex frequency as an amateur radio operator, and no one else of immediate contact as an amateur radio operator, really does no good. All right. So maybe when you do that plan and stuff, if the person isn't licensed or they can't be a person who they can get a hold of that is licensed to do these things, then maybe you should choose a different radio service that would allow that operation without, let's say, having an amateur radio license on there. So kind of an interesting question, but nevertheless a very good question. All right, question number 5. What is a good radio maintenance plan? So we did one of our last few episodes, so not last week's listener mail, but the one before it is your radio service light is on. And when that one, we kind of talked and discussed about like maintaining your radios, doing the preventative maintenance on there. How can you make a radio last years and through multiple situations as compared to going ahead and using the radio for maybe a year or two, maybe 3 years, and you got to go ahead and buy a new one. Now, I'm not talking about the outmode of technology or anything like that. I'm talking about the longevity of the radio on there. So how long can you continue to use this FM analog radio, or how long can you continue to use this P25 radio? And once again, there's a lot of other factors that go ahead and go into that, why a radio is not going to be used anymore. But what is a good maintenance plan? So kind of starting from top to bottom, and we kind of touched on some of these in the show, but it's a good refresher, is antenna. First of all, don't misuse or abuse the antenna. Make sure you have spare antennas, but more importantly, make sure that that base where the antenna connects to the radio on that screw down terminal, especially if it's an SMA connector, please, 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 excuse me, please, 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 do not put any extra stress on those radios or that part of the radio on there. Next thing is going to obviously go ahead and be the housing and stuff. Get a protective case. Get something on there. That's a good radio maintenance plan on there. And guess what? Don't be afraid to refresh cases. And what I mean by that is, as I've had public safety radios that have sat on my hip, that the radios have operated fine, but you're walking down a hall, it's a narrow hall, and it slides against the wall, and you got scuff marks on the display, you got scuff marks on the case. Maybe use it in the business world, and maybe you have paint all over the radio that is dripped down because you're a painter, or grass stain, whatever the case may be. Don't be afraid to do a radio refresh housing on there. And then finally, the batteries. So the batteries are important. Don't overcharge a battery. Don't undercharge a battery. Don't overwork a battery. Those are the 3 things. Don't overcharge, undercharge, or overwork. Now, how does that come into a good radio maintenance plan? Well, a good radio maintenance plan is to know when things are in service and when things are happening. So for an example, if you have a new battery that you're going to buy, mark it so you know that that is a new battery. And then if you have an older battery you're replacing, or just another battery that's being supplemented on there, then you're going to know and say, hey, wait a minute here. No, I need to circulate my batteries through. Don't be afraid to change antennas through. If you have multiple radios that do the same thing, don't be afraid to cycle the usage of the radio on there too. So if you have 2 radios that do the same thing, there might be different model numbers and stuff like that. If you could use them at the same time, don't let model A be the one that you always go to and model B sit on the shelf and do nothing. That does no good for the radio in any way, shape, or form. Finally, I know this is going to be a shocker to some of you, but if you have more radios than you can operate, maybe it's time that you think about, yes, selling a radio. I know. People are going to be like, shut your mouth, John, blasphemy. My wife better not have heard this, those kind of things like that on there. But seriously, if you have a bunch of HTs sitting around doing nothing, get rid of them. Okay? Because if they're sitting around doing nothing, you no longer have a need for them. Same thing with mobile radios. Same thing even with your HF radios. Okay? Just throwing an idea out there. But I'll even go one step further. If, depending on the radio service, you have these extra radios laying around and are not doing anything, maybe look into a youth program, or maybe look into a giveaway program, or maybe look into some sort of program of some sort that's saying, okay, wait a minute here. Hi, I want to donate my radios, or can you use these radios to help with whatever the case may be? And you know what? Sometimes that goes pretty far. And in addition to that, you may be able to do it as a tax write-off. If it's a tax write-off, you don't need to go ahead and claim income. I donate probably a couple radios each year for a certain specific purpose. That, hey, I was going to use this radio, or hey, I was going to do this, and I'm not going to do this anymore, so no sense of sitting on there on a shelf whatsoever. So just some food for thought on how you want to do the maintenance plan. And it's kind of, once again, like I said, about a car. Know how many charges the batteries are. Try to circulate the batteries through a couple different radios if you can, or circulate their usage. Be careful with your radio. Don't be afraid to baby your radio a little bit on there, but, carry it in a leather-bound case, holster, something like that on there. And then just, once again, watch timer usage. Final thought about this is I told that to a fire department one time. They were going through radios kind of quickly. They were going through batteries on radios pretty bad. And then they said, well, it must be the radios. And then they got newer radios, and they noticed that the problem with the new radios, noticed the problem that the old radios had, the new radios were, guess what? Doing that same thing. Well, it turned out that their usage was horrible, because what they do is they go ahead and put the radio with the battery and the charger on the charger. It's maybe on the truck. They come back from the fire call, whatever, ambulance, whatever, plug in the truck, shoreline, and then it's charging. Then they take out the radio, and then they use it, and then poof, the battery's been cooking so long it's no good. So just a couple ideas on there. Alrighty. Now normally comes to part in the show that I would do what really bends my antenna. But being that this is the last show of the year, I didn't want to do that. Usually bend my antenna, we kind of joked, started a couple episodes ago, as kind of a little bit of a commentary about what an episode was about. So, different cases, different situations, whatever. Just kind of like a little bit of a levity, but kind of like a closing note, a thought or point or something on there. I didn't want to do that this time because this episode really didn't have anything really associated with it. What it did have, or what it does need to have happen here, is some thank yous and some resources. Excuse me. So first of all, I want to thank everybody that has subscribed to my channel, that has tuned into my shows, that has watched the shows, that have gave me comments and feedback and everything like that, and people that I'm starting to become and know as friends. I really do appreciate that. And I kind of hit on it kind of in before, Communications Cigars is really designed to be a non-manufactured, non-specific type of show, and mainly sort of like a show for thinking about things, for bringing ideas forward, to have open discussions and everything like that on there. We do cover all the different types of communication, or at least we try to really good. We're not just amateur. We're not just CB, we're not just GMRS, FRS, we're kind of everything, and we try to be across the board. But it was very nice to see that, when we started this in September, when I had this idea on there, it kind of started out a little bit as a one-to-one kind of thing on there, and then it kind of grew from that point there. It was kind of basically thoughts that I've done myself in the past, but now it was more loaded for bear with with YouTube instead of just Facebook and everything on there. In that time, it's grown. So through the months of starting in September, October, November, now we're in December, over these 4 months, I've had subscribers that grow up to 200. And I thank everyone. I'm appreciative. When I see that number up in the air, we're over 200, that's a pretty amazing number to me. That means that, hey, guess what? There's people that I'm making contact with. There's information I'm making contact with on there. And I, just like in public safety, just like why I became an Elmer in amateur radio, just like why I do help people in business and communications and do all those kind of things like that, is that I don't believe he who has the most knowledge has the most power. Everybody started out young. Everybody started out not knowing anything. We all did. Whether we liked to admit it or not, we all did. But it's not just one person telling you. It's not just one channel you should subscribe to. It's really a whole series of different people and different channels and different things you should do. I know with COVID and all those kind of things like that on there, everybody who has had a camera and a laptop and 5 minutes and something they think is worthwhile will put it on there. Because let's face it, if we didn't, we wouldn't have TikTok. Jokes aside. But I wanted to take a moment to, once again, say thank you for the last episode of 2021 for tuning into these shows, for subscribing to these shows. I also want to thank the people that have had me on their shows, the people that I've worked with. I've made reference to their shows. They've actually made reference to my shows on there because we're all working together. There are subject matter experts, SMEs, and all these different fields out there. And guess what? We all work together as a community. And anything we do in radio, we all work together as a community. So, because you turn in my show on Monday nights and you watch and you listen, I appreciate that. I say thank you. But I'm going to give you a list here of a few others. So first of all, want to hear some other things? Tune into some of my friends there on Coffee and Ham Radios. They're on weekends, Saturday and Sunday mornings, 9 a.m. Central Time. I'm in Central Time Zone, so 9 a.m. Central Time. They have their YouTube channel, Coffee and Ham Radios. You're going to go ahead and find 4 guys on there. You're going to find Ham Radio Dude. You're going to find Chuck, KK6USY, Ham Radio Ventures. You're going to find Temporary Offline, T.O., he's there on there. And then you're going to have the Smokin' Ape. Great group of guys. Been on their show a few times. They've invited me on a few times. It's been great. I always find great pleasure in going on their shows. But it's not just those 4 guys doing Coffee and Ham Radios. Each of them has their own other individual YouTube channels also too. So don't be afraid to check them out also, because that's kind of important too, is because while it's great to do group stuff, it also is good to also break it down and get a little more granular on some of the subjects which they do cover. So that's the advice too. The other one I want to also thanks to is Ham Radio 2.0, Jason down in Texas. I've been on his show a few times on there as what he calls it? I think he calls it the happy hour. But once again, another different viewpoint, another different coming into talking a lot about the amateur radio community there with Jason's channel. But he does cover some other non-amateur radios and stuff like that on there. Why do I bring it up? Because that sounds like, wow, that's really unconventional. Why would you bring up someone else's YouTube channel? Wouldn't you want yours to be popular? Well, yes. Would I like to have a lot of subscribers? I would. But I feel it's more important to bring content. But also, too, it's also in this day and age good to have different viewpoints and different projections, is the way I call it, of the same topic from many different sides and many different angles. So as I go into 2022, I'm going to be making some different adjustments. Going to be getting a little things here, hopefully clean this mess up back there. Sorry, you can see that probably the workbench is pretty big. But we're going to be making some other little improvements on there. We're going to be always doing new shows and new contents dealing with about communications in general. When the weather gets better, we may even have a cigar once again when we do the episode. But whatever the case it may be, thank you for tuning in this year. We haven't done a full year even, so that's where the interesting point is. It's kind of a good reflection of where we're at. But don't be afraid to search out other information that is out there on the internet. And yes, did I say search out other information? Yes. Did I tell you to take it for face value? No, I did not. But don't be afraid to compare other informations. Because what I might present on my channel, you may get maybe 75% of it, but that last 25% could come from another YouTube channel on there or another users. But as I'm saying is that there's a lot that's out there. Do your research, enjoy, be able to share your knowledge. That's one of the key things about the world that we live in, is being able to share our knowledge and then help people to go ahead and do it. I used to, in closing, have this one statement that I always said, and it was always told to me. So, John, if you ever get into management, if you ever get into a high prestigious position, not necessarily management, but a high prestigious position, remember that the person you train today could be your boss tomorrow. And I will tell you this, hands down, in the last 10 years, I've had 2 instances where the person that I have trained has ended up to be my boss. Not because they like kissed butt or something, got up the chain faster than me. No. I don't necessarily want to be the boss in some cases, but they have become the boss. So I feel that principle, that feeling, that idea, that mindset, whatever we want to call it, how we want to put the nomenclature to it, is very valid and is how my channel also operates on here too. So until then, I will see everybody in 2022. I want everybody to please take care of themselves and be healthy, stay well, stay safe. It's a different world that we do live in, but we all still continue to live and function in it. Until then, sit back and enjoy the cigars if you have. Stay safe, and we'll catch you in 2022.